Welcome everyone to our few minutes together on the Parsha. This Shabbos, a unique Shabbos. It's a combination of Parshas Vayakhel and Pekudei, the final two sedras in Sefer Shmos, and it also happens to be Parshas Parah, and it also happens to be a Shabbos Mevorachim HaChodesh. So there's a lot going on, and we're going to try to at least encapsulate in our few minutes together something about the Parsha and something about Parshas Parah. Now, the first word of this week's Torah reading is Vayakhel, and the pasuk says that Vayakhel Moshe as Kol Adas Bnei Yisrael, that Moshe gathered together. As Rashi points out, they all came just by his word. He gathered them all together to speak to them, and to speak to them about the importance of Shabbos and the connection it has with the Mishkan. But as you go through the Sedra, you'll notice, especially from the beginning on, that there's a certain amount of pageantry taking place, because Moshe is recording how the people brought all the different items that were necessary in order to build the Mishkan properly. They brought the wool and the gold and the silver. They brought all the various needs of the boards and the walls and the curtains, all the things that were needed in order to make all of the kalim and all of the tapestries. And everyone seemed to be on a parade, eagerly coming. In fact, the Torah records that so many people brought so many things. There was such an eagerness to be involved in the building of this Mishkan that they had to send out a call and tell people, "Die, it's enough. You've brought enough." And the Torah even records the Hoser, and there was left over. Can you picture, please, in your mind's eye, the Jewish people in the Midbar coming from all around the entire encampment of the Jewish people that were camped by different flags and tribes, and all of them making their way to the central point where Moshe and Aaron were, and collecting all the items that they need in piles and piles of all the different things, all the accoutrements that were necessary to build the Mishkan, and eagerly people bringing all that they had, parents, men, women, children, everyone bringing. It must have been awesome in its beauty when people were doing it, and they seemed so eager to do it. You know, it's a little bit like all the preparations that we do for Pesach. There's this hustle and bustle and constant running around. You look in the streets and you see people buying and preparing, cleaning and getting rid of and bringing new things and buying clothes and fixing the house up and whatever it is, all coming together. There's this tremendous amount of effort, similar in some ways to the concerted effort of all the Jewish people in the building of the Mishkan. Parshas Parah is mentioned in the Halacha by the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Taf Reish Pei Hey, right before Hilchas Purim, believe it or not, where it talks about the Daled Parshios, and it talks about the fact that the third of the four Parshios is Parshas Parah. The Chafetz Chaim, in his comment on the Shulchan Aruch in the Mishnah Berurah, makes a very beautiful statement about Parshas Parah. And he says, you know, the reason we read Parshas Parah is because the Parah Aduma was necessary through the institution of the laws of the Parah Aduma, which can be found in Chumash Bamidbar and Parshas Chukas, telling us how the ashes of the red cow were mixed with Mayim Chaim and was sprinkled on anyone who was Tameh. And the purpose of this was so that they could bring the Korban Pesach. They could bring the Pesach sacrifice, which you couldn't do if you were in a state of Tumah. So there was this eagerness of people to come to get themselves in a purified state. The Mishnah Berurah, that's the Chafetz Chaim's comment on the Shulchan Aruch, says, you know why we read Parshas Parah? Lehispalel lefanav Yisbarach, to pray before God. Shegam aleinu yizrok mayim tahorim b'meheira, that also to us Hashem should sprinkle the purifying waters, which would enable us to bring the Korban Pesach in the Beis Hamikdash. We are all very busy right now, and we're preparing for Pesach. just like all the Jews were busy at that time making the Mishkan. But there's something that both of us, they and we now, today, have to keep in our mind. They were building a Mishkan which was of a temporary dwelling nature. And eventually they were going to take that and all that preparation and all the things they did, which was going to last a mere 40 years, and at that time they didn't even know it was only 40 years, and they eventually took all that energy to go to Eretz Yisrael and to build the kingdom of Hashem in the land of Israel, in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. We, all our preparations, and even though at the end of the Seder we say L'shana haba Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim habenuyah, that we should keep in mind that all of these preparations and all of the cleanliness and all of the purifications and all of the pageantry and all of the beauty of the Pesach Seder is all for one purpose, so that ultimately we can see the coming of the Mashiach that will take us back to Yerushalayim, to the main goal of making the Korban Pesach in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. Let's try to keep that in mind as we go through the preparations for Pesach, Chodesh Nisan, Parshas Parah, and Parshas Vayakhel and Pekudei. Have a wonderful Shabbos.